Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle, and on behalf of the Wood County Committee on Aging, we welcome everyone to our training today on Diversity Today. We have with us Eric Myers. He was a professor at Bowling Green State University. He has his BA in Politics and Government, his Master's of Education in Special Education, his Education S in Education Administration and Supervision, and his EDD in Education Administration and Supervision. So we welcome Eric today to discuss our topic of religions of the world, religions of the U.S., and Christianity in the U.S. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity and enjoy seeing some of the faces I've seen from a couple other presentations. This is the second of 3 parts of a presentation on diversity. Last week, those of you who were there will remember that we talked about the differences in backgrounds and differences people have, that we are all diverse in our own way. This week, we're going to talk about religion, and I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint on it. And it's doubtful we'll get all the way through it, but we'll see what we can do with it. All right. I have to give this disclaimer. I say it with a smile. I don't profess to be an expert in religion, and most certainly do not wish to promote one faith over another. So I would be attempting to do an even-handed presentation. This is just for information only, and it certainly doesn't represent the values and thoughts of the Wood County Committee on Aging. Everything that's here is my thoughts. Just, you may or may not know, I'm the president of the governing board for the Wood County Committee on Aging, and I will try not to get them in trouble with anything. Some of the words that you may need to know while we talk about religion. The first 2 are sectarian and non-sectarian. And what these basically define as religious-oriented or non-religious oriented. Sectarian, the word first 4 letters sect kind of give away that if something is a sectarian discussion, it's a discussion of, in this case, religion. Non-sectarian is what the Constitution of the United States says that our government is to be, that we are not to promote or discredit any religion, nor are we to acknowledge or discourage any knowledge of religion. That's obviously one that's up for debate. A term that you hear frequently is atheism. And some of us can remember back when there was a court case about religion in schools, and the lady who filed the court case was an atheist. She did not believe in the existence of a God or a religion, and there is no religion. So atheism means a denial of all faith and religion. Agnostic is a term that basically means that you're willing to accept there might be a God or not be a God. You don't want to hedge your bets either way. So while you accept that there may be a higher power out there, you're not going to profess one faith or another, or that there isn't any. The important word on this list at the moment is the word adherent. Most faiths and religions in the world have adherents. They are people who are follow a certain faith. If you are, say, a Methodist or a Presbyterian or a Lutheran, you are probably a member of the church. Okay, but a lot of faiths don't have members. Buddhist and Hindu, they don't belong to a specific temple. that they go to, they are Buddhist or they are Hindu. So an adherent is a follower of a certain faith. So you can't compare members from church to church because it's comparing apples and oranges for different faiths. I included these words, and I'm not going to go into great detail on them, but if you were to ask somebody about Pentecostal, they would tell you that that's a faith where folks sometimes speak in tongues, and it can be a variety of different faiths. Charismatic is often described as the laying on of the hands for healing. And evangelical, which is a very common term, is that of, if you go back to its definition, is the being born again in Christ. So those are just some terms that are commonly found. The largest religions in the world, and again, these aren't exact numbers, and I'm kind of hiding the percentages over there, but the religion with the most adherents or followers in the world is Christianity. Second most and growing the fastest of any of these religions is Islam. The third largest, and they call it religion, but it's actually lack of, is unaffiliated, or the AA stands for agnostic or atheist, as we talked about. So these are people who either profess that they are not religious, or that they don't believe in God, or that they don't believe in a specific higher being. The next largest religion is Hinduism, and it is also growing at a large rate because this is a faith that is found in India, which is population-wise the fastest growing country in the world. Buddhism. Other religions are folk religions, and these might be anything from a religion from Africa, from the different tribal groups, to other religions. And this also includes folks in China, where communist China has, if not banned, certainly discouraged organized religion. And a lot of these religions are the ones that are in the western part of the country, not where all the major cities are, and these are the ones that are out in the country. You might notice that there's one faith that's not on the largest list that you might have expected, which is Judaism. And it is actually the 12th largest religion in the world, with about 14 million members. And we'll touch on that for a second. Other large ones in the top 9 is Sikhism, or Sikhism. It's heard it pronounced both ways. This is a religion of individuals from mainly India. If you were to meet an individual who was a follower, a male, who was a follower of the Sikh faith, he would be probably wearing a turban when you met him, because the males of this faith, once they reach adulthood, which is about 15 years old for them, they never cut their hair. So that their hair can be, you've probably seen pictures of people with hair that go to the ground and further down. These individuals do not cut their hair, frequently do not shave, and so they wrap their hair up, and that's why they wear a turban. It's very close to Hinduism, but it is itself not a Hindu faith. Some other religions that you may have heard of that make the top 22 in the world include Baha'i, Shinto, which is Japanese, the Neo-paganism, United Universalism, which we'll talk about, Rastafarianism, which is Bob Marley in Jamaica, if that rings a bell with you. And then for those of you into Hollywood and cult-like religions there, Scientology. One of the most famous Scientology members would be Tom Cruise. So those are the major ranked religions in the world, and ran down a few of them. A few I didn't mention, and it's probably because I can't pronounce them, but they are definitely some other religions that are in there. So worldwide, that's the largest religions. The three largest religions in America, and I have an asterisk there because really in the top three would also fit, it's not really religion, it's the ones who have no religion would probably be about second or third in the United States. But the three largest acknowledged religions in America are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Christianity, the major breakdown of Catholic and Protestant and other. Judaism has branches that are ultra-conservative or ultra-Orthodox. And they made the ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox Jews in New York made news because they rioted because of the requirements to wear masks and things like that. That occurred in New York. Conservative, Reform, and then secular. Secular is the least strict, ultra-Orthodox is the most strict. In Islam, there are branches, but the main two are Sunni and Shiite. And they do not get along, which explains wars between Iran and Iraq and some of the other Middle East countries. Those kind of fall down along the lines of which branch of Islam that they follow. The big three religions, as they call them, have some similarities. First, they are monotheistic, so there is one God. All three of them may have a different version of God, but all three follow just one God. They are all based on and came from Abraham. And if you go into the Bible, you will find that Abraham was the common patriarch of the Abrahamic religions, which are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In Judaism, he is the founding father of the Covenant of the Pieces, which is the special relationship between Hebrews and gods. In Christianity, he is the prototype of all believers. And in Islam, he is seen as a link with the prophets, particularly with starting with Adam and culminating in Muhammad. Is to note that in the Islamic faith, with Muhammad, he is the prophet upon which their faith is based. And when he passed away, there was a struggle between his sons for power, and that's where the break started with the Sunni and Shiite going different directions. So the two different classifications in Islam go all the way back to Muhammad. All three have a holy book, the Bible, the Torah, which is one of three holy books, and the Quran for the Islamic faith. And all of them have branches within each other. Branches of Christianity. If I were to ask you, my students have a hard time with this because I will ask them to name three largest faiths in America, and they will go Christian, Catholic, and Protestant. And not understanding that Protestant and Catholic are all part of the Christian faith. There are 5 different groups that can be found within Christianity. Some are rather obscure: Church of the East, the Oriental Orthodoxy. You've all heard of Eastern Orthodox or Greek Orthodox. There are several churches in, well, I know for sure there's one in Rossford and there's another one in Monclova, which are mainly Greek Orthodox. Then the two largest, Roman Catholicism and Protestantism. Those two obviously are the largest, and the next would be Greek Orthodoxy. I am myself Protestant, so I'm familiar with the branches and different things there. Not being Catholic, I wasn't sure if there were different branches or not, so I looked it up on the computer, and the response there was that technically the Catholic Church does not have branches. By definition, the Catholic Church is one, united completely in doctrine, dogma, and under the authority of our blessed Lord, exercised through his vicar on the earth, the Pope, the Holy Father. Obviously, there are subsections, such as the Franciscans and Jesuits and other groups like that. Again, I'm not greatly familiar with those branches. In Protestants, you have mainline churches, and we're going to talk about these in a minute. We have other line churches and non-denominational, and I have listed, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the mainline churches, other line churches, and non-denominational in a second. Trends in religion in the United States is that members, adherents of the traditional Christian faith are shrinking in our country. When this survey was done, incidentally, if you're ever just looking for something interesting to read, you might go to the Pew Research Center, just Google Pew Research, and they have statistics on all kinds of things American, including a lot about different faiths. So spelled ironically just like the church pew, although that's not how it was named, it's P-E-W. Okay, when this is showing a decline of Protestants in the United States, 51% of the people were Protestant, and that has now fallen to a current 43%. So they have lost 8% of their membership. Catholics, 24% were recognized as Catholic, and then they started doing the survey, and that has gone down to 20% of Americans. Nothing in particular. Don't go to church, not interested, has risen from 12% up to 17%. So the trends in America are that the mainline churches, both Protestant and Catholic, are losing members rapidly. And those who are nothing in particular, whether they don't attend or don't believe, is rising somewhat rapidly, and will not be long before there are more than who attend the Catholic Church. And then the growth of agnostic and atheist basically started at 2% of our population, and now it's up to 5%. So not only are there ones who are not particularly interested in religion, and there are those who do not believe, and put those all together, and you get approximately 20-25% of the country. So the general religious shift, the general religious shift in America right now is to the mainline churches are getting much smaller, and the non-member, non-believer, unbelievers, as you will, percentage is getting larger. In Protestant churches, the mainline Protestant churches, these are the old traditional churches. These were the ones that were big when you and I were young. These are the ones that pretty much everybody went to if you were Protestant. The largest is Baptist. Now there's all kinds of different Baptist churches. The one thing that I noticed when I was in the South and we were driving around through Mississippi and and Alabama and Georgia was that there was a Baptist church about every 5 miles. Many different kinds of Baptist churches, but there were just hundreds and hundreds of them. And it got to the point where we were starting to wonder if we went 5, 10 miles and didn't see one. So Baptist church is mainly more popular in the South, but certainly exists in the North. In Bowling Green, I think there are 2 or 3 Baptist churches, might even be more. Second largest is the Church of God in Christ. Then the ones that you would traditionally think of, Methodist, Presbyterian, Lutheran, and Episcopal. The AME is a traditionally African-American church, at least in the South. So these are the mainline Protestant churches that exist and are the largest in the United States right now. And again, all of these are losing population. An area of churches that is not losing population is non-denominational. Their nicknames are big box churches. And that's because they frequently are very, very large, have large sanctuaries, and they are growing particularly with the age of younger people, millennials, and Gen Z. These are the churches that are growing very quickly. The big box churches are basically non-denominational. They generally are not from a formal national association and are independent or standalone or maybe affiliated with a few other churches. And these are the fastest growing churches in America. Some local examples on campus and now downtown Bowling Green. They have a branch, is H2O, which is pretty much student run. And you will find them, I think they're now on 10 campuses in Ohio and a little bit of Kentucky. They are starting a branch in Tiffin. One of my former students is one of the leaders there, and they are now opening up a branch on Ohio University. And again, another one of my students will be the leader at H2O. Crossroads, Cornerstone, and Cedar Creek. Cedar Creek is the largest of these and has multiple branches throughout the Toledo area. The non-denominational churches are growing very rapidly, as I mentioned, and part of the reason that they're growing is that they are very much attempting to attract the younger generations. They have bands. There's a lot of singing and joy, praise in their services. They generally have a very dynamic individual as lead pastor. My son and daughter-in-law go to a church in Evansville that fits into this category. And we went to the service with them, and it was unusual to me, but not necessarily to other people, where for the first 20 minutes we stood and sang a hymn, a song. It was on a screen, the band played. It may have been more than one song, I don't know, to be honest. And then the pastor, Bobby, gave a sermon, and it was actually a very good sermon on that day. But the things that struck me were, number one, it's very, very casual. Number two, they had coffee cup holders in their seats and highly pushed, getting coffee, get comfortable. Totally different than the formal services of the kind of thing that I grew up with. So those are non-denominational. It is nothing for them to get 3,000 people to come to a service. Another factor with them is that they have very few actual members. It's a very stringent project to become an actual member. So you could say that they have a lot of adherents rather than members for the non-denominational. And this is, if religion is growing anywhere in America, it is through these kind of churches. We have some other kinds of faiths that are out there, and these were sort of selected randomly. I am not an expert, as I have mentioned, and sometimes a little knowledge is more dangerous than no knowledge. All but one of these are recognized as Christian churches. And the first one, Church of the Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ, was most commonly known as the Mormon Church, but they have backed away from the use of the name Mormon and now refer to their church and to themselves as members of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, or LDS. The young lady that spoke last week in the session, Emma Stewart, is a member of the Latter-day Saints, and she gave our class a very good explanation about them. Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witness, and Christian Scientists are all Christian, and the Unitarian Universalism is not a Christian church. There's a qualifier on that, but Church of the Latter-day Saints believe in Jesus Christ as the literal Son of God and Messiah, his crucifixion and the conclusion of sin offering. However, they do not accept that he is part of the Holy Trinity, and so that's one of the basic tenets. Basically, the Church of the Latter-day Saints started in the late 1800s in New York, where Joseph Smith got the message, and he is one of the saints, of which there are several that's what the Latter-day Saints refers to. So their saints come from the 1850s and on. They were persecuted in New York, so they moved to Illinois, and where they were also persecuted because of their lack of belief in the Holy Trinity and Jesus Christ as the Son of God. So they moved to Utah, which is where you're familiar with the church, Salt Lake City. A very large percentage of those who live in Utah are members of the Church of the Latter-day Saints. I was talking with Emma, the student, last week, and asked if she would have to go out and do the 2 years mission, because up until recently, all 18, 19-year-olds had to go on a 2-year mission as sent by the church. They now have a route where you do not have to do that. She chose not to do that. But we do get members from other communities and from the Church of Latter-day Saints, and they come and do their mission in Bowling Green. And because we live about a block and a half from their church, we tend to get visits from their folks on the mission. They're all very, very polite. They're not pushy at all. I did go when I was principal of the high school with our leading sing group, the Madrigals, and we stopped in Salt Lake City on a Western tour. And we went to the headquarters there, and we watched the rehearsal for the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, and then our choir got to sing for them. The day after we got back, I was visited by the mission, folks from the mission, with the Book of Mormon. They have very good communication. They're also the folks behind Ancestry.com, and they have the best system in the world for tracing families. So, Seventh-day Adventists share many of the basic beliefs of Protestant Christianity, the authority of the Bible, and as you can read, the difference with them, number one, is the seventh day is their Sabbath, which is Saturday. And they also don't believe in, when I was principal of the high school, whenever we had pep rallies or assemblies or any gathering other than an educational purpose, the students who were Seventh-day Adventists would sit in my office because it was against their faith. Jehovah's Witnesses also follow the teaching and example of Christ, but they believe that Jesus is not God and there is no scriptural basis for the Trinity doctrine. They also do not believe in such things as pep rallies. In fact, they are more stringent on that than the Seventh-day Adventists. The Christian Scientist, my father was born and raised a Christian Scientist. He grew up in Illinois and in Kansas City, and his parents were practicing Christian Scientists, and it almost killed him. He was in college, and his appendix burst. And generally in the Christian Scientist faith, they feel that you are healed through prayer, and that if you have medical and physical issues, you go through prayer, you don't use a doctor. Well, obviously my father went to the hospital and then survived because because that would not have been acceptable with his faith, and I believe that was the end of his membership with Christian Scientists. So if you were ill, someone from the church would come and pray with you, and hopefully they would heal you. The last group is the Unitarian Universalists. This is a group that is not Christian, not because they don't believe in Christ, but because they are more accepting of universal principles and religions in an inclusive manner. There is a Unitarian church halfway between Bowling Green and Perrysburg on 25, and you know where it is because their signboard is always interesting. Different titles and different things that they do, but they pretty much believe or accept any religious faith or background, and Christ as they do accept Christ as a religious leader, but then they also accept Buddha, the Hindu gods, and different things. When my father, who obviously gave up Christian Scientist when I was in high school, decided that he was in search of the perfect sermon. So he was going from church to church trying to find a sermon that met his interest. He was an intellectual. He wrote textbooks on electrical engineering. He was known internationally. He was a very bright man. Too bad I didn't inherit any of that. But he was looking to be challenged in a sermon. And one Sunday morning, he got me up. As you can imagine, a teenager was not thrilled to be pulled out of bed, made to dress up. And he and I went to a Unitarian church, although I had no idea what it was. I just knew it was a church. But I knew I wasn't in the Presbyterian church I was raised in, because the very first reading was from Buddha. And somehow that struck me as a little different. And we went through, there were some Hindu comments, some readings from the Torah. It was very interesting because it had a wide amount of discussion in it. And it was interesting to me, but not enough that I continued following up with it. The Universalists, the Unitarian Church typically has professors who are members of it, and some other folks, lawyers and folks like that. But it's a very interesting concept and interesting church. So that's basically the religions. I want to tell you one quick story. My very, very good friend is Jewish, and he had a daughter, Meredith, and they had the naming ceremony. And so we were, along with some folks from my department at the university, were invited to the naming ceremony of his church, of his synagogue, which is up in Sylvania. And so we went on a Friday night. And when we got there, we were handed a piece of paper, which I didn't pay much attention to. And they had the naming ceremony. Sitting in the aisle with me as I was watching the naming ceremony was my wife and I, who were Protestant, our department chair, who was Catholic, two faculty members. One was U.S. born and bred, and the other she was born in South Korea, but they were Buddhist. And then sitting next to them was a gay couple who were atheists. I was just thinking, where in the world would you ever get a collection of people all together like that in a religious service? The piece of paper that they gave me was the rabbi's message. He basically wrote out his entire message and gave it to you so that I guess it would reinforce what he was saying. I grew up in a Presbyterian church where the sermons, and I think some of you will reflect back on this, were about 45 minutes long. So you could imagine as a 13-year-old going to church and listening to Reverend Moser speak for 45 minutes, generally not catching on to anything he had to say at the time. So I was sort of enthralled that the rabbi in his message actually gave you a written copy of it. And to this day, I remember what he talked about, which was, when is it okay to not admit that you are Jewish? And it had to do with, he was the United States military rabbi. He was in charge of all Jewish rabbis in the United States military besides being rabbi. And it was referenced to when you were Jewish in the Middle East, and if you were captured, did you let them know you were Jewish? And his main point was, yes, it's okay to hide the fact that you were Jewish in those circumstances. So I don't remember many sermons. I've actually had to give some of my own. I don't remember what I said, but I remember that one for some reason. So that's a very quick look at religions. I'm going to get out of share screen, and then we'll see if you have any questions or anything that you want to talk about.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll just take a moment and we'll stop the recording. So thank you everyone for joining us for this second session on diversity. And we will continue next week for our third session, and it'll be on sexuality. So I will just pause the recording.